There's nothing more productive in the operation of a business, whether a giant corporation or a two-man shop, than intelligent control, motivation, and inspiration of the people in that business. That's the subject of this edition of Executive Seminars in Sound, Guides to Better People Management.
Last chance. Buy you Christmas tree, only 50 cents. Yes, sir. You like it? This a nicer tree? Only 50 cents. No place else open.
Alessandro Della Ponte, native of Genoa, 19 years old. His first enterprise in America. He cleared a Christmas tree lot on Christmas Eve, carried 20 trees 6 blocks by hand to the front of his boss's grocery store, and sold them all for a clear profit of $10. The foundation of a fortune.
Okay.
Now, December 1970, Alessandro Della Ponte, Mr. Alex, Chief Executive Officer of one of the nation's biggest food processing and packaging companies, has announced that he's stepping down as president of the company, but remaining board chairman. His hardest task was to find and develop a man to replace his own dynamic leadership.
Well, now, Mr. Della Ponte, you say you'll remain as board chairman. Will your successor, Walt Ingram, have full authority to run the company?
If not, why should I retire?
Is it true that you once fired Walt Ingram, the man you've appointed to succeed you?
That's right.
As a man who says his greatest commodity is people, why would you reverse yourself?
Let's just say that I'm entitled to at least one mistake. All right, that's all, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
That was a pretty good question, Alex. But I don't buy the answer.
You mean that when I fired you 10 years ago, the young man in a hurry with the million ideas, I didn't make a mistake? After all, I'm not perfect, Walt.
Neither am I, Alex. But you know, you fired me 10 years ago because I wouldn't do things your way.
You're mostly right, Walt. My biggest mistake was in hiring you in the first place. In spite of that old story about selling Christmas trees, I didn't build this company on nickels and dimes. I built it on people. And when you came along, I had begun to think about a successor, and I could see so much of myself in you that I couldn't resist trying to bring you along. Except you wouldn't be brought.
Oh, I wanted it badly enough, Alex. But I just couldn't wait. And there were a lot of tempting offers starting to come in, so I decided to run with that frozen hors d'oeuvre idea.
And I fired you for it.
Overstepping my authority.
Not exactly. All of a sudden, I realized that it's a waste trying to recruit someone who will eventually head up a company. He's usually the wrong kind of person to bring along. He's not always a good team man. He has too much sense of destiny. He's too ruthless, too reckless, too bright, too dynamic to grow through the ranks. But I've hired you back for the very same characteristics that made me let you go.
Alex Della Ponte built his business by acquisition of failing firms with good product, but anemic staffing. A hard-driving, dynamic man he recruited and restaffed to fit his concept of an efficient organization. In the course of time, experience taught him that recruiting good people was expensive. There were many failures. He knew that his philosophy was sound, but he wasn't going about it right.
So I went to consultants, special seminars. I made it my business to learn everything I could about how I could find good people and bring them up through the company to make it strong from top to bottom. I wanted to clean house, but I had no replacements. Then, one day, I talked to a young man from a consulting firm who seemed to put everything in a nutshell. His name was John Norwood.
You see, Mr. Della Ponte, you're scattering your efforts too much. You need to concentrate on the one kind of person above the hourly wage level who can be recruited successfully, the middle management man, or the person who has a strong potential for middle management. But before you do that, you've got to hire the most important person of all.
The man who finds these people?
The man who finds them and runs a program to make sure that the real comers move up in your company to fill the top administrative posts, the vice presidents who keep things running smoothly.
I suppose you're that man, huh?
Well, I confess that I like to be. I know that I'm qualified by experience, but it's important for both of us that the decision be right.
Well, how do we find out?
Well, first of all, find some other professionally qualified men to talk to. Remember now, you've got to be very careful, since only about 0.5% to 1% of all college graduates are qualified for top executive potential. Another thing, I may not fit in with you or with your company. Now, I'm certainly not qualified to decide. I suggest that you have our firm do the job for you. They'll do a good job of lining up qualified people, and if you want me to be among them, all right. But it must come from you.
As it turned out, Della Ponte did hire Norwood. After using all the professional tools available, the consulting firm recommended 3 men, including John Norwood, emphasizing that their recommendation was tantamount to a prediction that any one of the men would be successful. Each man was subjected to an in-depth interview, testing, as well as interviews with teachers, former employers, and associates, and research of all available records. The findings were then matched against the demands of the job: working conditions, pressures, opportunities, and quality and compatibility of supervision.
Actually, the method we used to hire John Norwood, our vice president of personnel, is the same we use now when you're recruiting in the management development programs.
Now, I buy your method of recruiting people, testing and researching for the key qualities and fitting them to the demands of the job.
I'd say quality and moderation are the key words. We look for intelligent men, not dazzling men. We want people who have a demonstrated reliable store of energy, not dynamos who wear out everyone around them. They must be physically sound and emotionally stable with good, satisfactory domestic and personal lives. It's very important, too, that they're tolerant of regimentation, don't strain at the leash. And certainly we don't want any people that need some kind of rehabilitation.
You know, I'm pretty concerned about the staff I'm going to inherit. Don't you care about professional qualifications at all?
Of course we do. But these are almost all professional people, and these credentials are easiest to confirm. Besides, technical capability can never outweigh the quality and suitability of the individual.
Don't some of our department heads try to keep a good man down?
They used to. But we've persuaded them of a better way. We evaluate all supervisory people on the basis of performance twice a year. Every supervisor rates the men under him and renders a report up the line, after going over it with the man in question. You see, one of your managers is expected to contribute to this program in a concrete way. Then he is more inclined to show how much he is contributing to the development of people in his division.
Continuing evaluation helps spot and coach the comers in the company in a way that artificial testing can never do. Alex Delaponte is interested in each person's resiliency, selling power, tough-mindedness, amenability to regimentation, orderliness, prudence, and above all, his plus factor in the clutch. In the words of Andrew Carnegie,
spend all the time and effort required to attract and develop the young, capable men. Once you have this, the buildings, the machines, the equipment, even the treasury will come in time. And if things go bad because of hard times, you may have to dispose of your buildings, machines, equipment, treasury, but try to hold your young, capable men, and you'll soon be back on top again.
it was a very nice party. But then, all of the so-called executive warming parties of transcontinental communications are nice. This one was to welcome Finley Wells, the new program manager of Transcom's TV station in this city. Finley's new to the company, a competent, pragmatic, innovative broadcaster who left a higher position at a smaller company because this seemed to offer more future. Now he's had his corporate physical exam, filled out all the papers at personnel. He's met his staff and other key people at the studios. He knows his way to the canteen and the washrooms and where all of the broadcast facilities are. He has also had a briefing from the division vice president, M.T. Rushmore.
Good to have you aboard, Wells. I've heard fine things about you. As you know, I'm the corporate figure on this scene and deal with all the matters of major policy. Now, if you have any questions that arise in that area, please drop by and I'll try to help.
Then, the general manager, Selden Smith, had a few words of encouragement.
Wells, I can't tell you how glad I am to have a man of your caliber on my team here. There's a great opportunity here for you to use your imagination and creativity to put this station right up where it ought to be. Just keep in touch with me and let me know how you're coming along.
That, and the party which was coyly named an executive warming, were what passed for Finley Wells' indoctrination into a critical key position during the ensuing weeks. First to shed light on things was Norma Wonder, the secretary Finley had inherited from his predecessor. And she was a real knockout.
Oh, it's so nice to have someone here to make some decisions, Mr. Wells. Poor Mr. Barton was such a wonderful person. Wonderful. But, what did they expect? After all, the poor dear had always been a performer. But he was so good to everyone.
Thanks, Norma. Now, what's for today?
Well, just sign this payroll,
Right.
and then there are these reports Mr. Barton never finished. They were due last week. And, there's Mr. Rushmore's Community Affairs Coordination meeting at 10. And today's the day Mr. Barton always auditions talent, and they're waiting in the lobby.
That was for openers. 2 weeks later, it was no better, and Wells was still being briefed and deluged with unannounced duties. First, a helpful word from Selden Smith.
I haven't heard anything from you on your plans for programming. I imagine you're dreaming up something pretty big.
Well, I haven't exactly had a chance to get to it. There's been a pretty big backlog of routine building up over a period of time, and it's way past due. Plus, reorganizing the department for a more efficient operation.
Speaking of efficiency, how are you coming on the annual budget for your department?
Oh, wait a minute. I have to develop a programming plan before I can run a budget.
Well, I guess a couple more weeks won't matter.
Couple more... Look, I just got here. This place is in a mess. I can't be creative and clean up the stable at the same time.
Okay, 3 weeks.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
Well, it's all too apparent that you don't like anything that poor Mr. Barton did. And just because I worked for him, you don't like what I do. So I guess the best... Mr. Wells's office. Oh, yes, Mr. Hummel, right here. It's Mr. Hummel.
All right. Hi, Pete. How are things in the big city? My topic for what meeting? The monthly program managers. When? Where? Well, certainly. No one told me a thing. I just can't make it, Pete. But there's a big mess here. Yes, Norma. Just a second, Pete.
Look, I just can't go on. Poor Mr. Barton, now I'm quitting. That's what I wanted to tell you. I just can't go through this again. Nobody told Mr. Barton anything, and now you're having the same problem.
I think you get the idea. This is what can happen when a company has no concrete plan for orientation of its new management people. But let Finley tell you how it all turned out.
I hate to think of that experience. I wound up by going to the division vice president for help. He went to the president. The president crawled all over the general manager, who eventually built a case against me for end-running him. And I resigned. I was out of work for nearly 6 months, simply because neither the manager nor I had been properly briefed and oriented about the really important things. And it's a different story where I'm working now.
Finley Wells' present employer realizes that any new man feels lonely and insecure and will want to talk to some person he can trust as he gets settled down in his job.
Before I ever went to work, I spent nearly 2 weeks at headquarters talking with all the key people I'd be dealing with, directly or indirectly. By the time I was through, I knew of all the corporate administrative idiosyncrasies, objectives, plans, expectations, their sense of values, and their internal and external image.
Then, when Finley arrived at the station, he started all over again.
Well, there was no executive warming party, and I had to find my own way to the washroom. But I knew where everything else was, all the areas of responsibility, all the technical facilities available to me, coordination of inter-office relations and administration. Of course, there were some chores that were unexpected. Every job has that, but the major responsibilities I'd been told about. I was ready for them.
It's taken 2 years, but that television station has moved from third place to first in that city, due in no small part to the fact that Finley's good orientation when he came on board as program manager enabled him to get off to a fast start in doing the job he was hired for. Now, Finley is training his assistant to take over his job when he moves up in the company next year.
Of course, I'm excited about the advancement, but one reason I can sleep nights is that when I move to the home office, my company will see to it that I'm not operating in the dark.
Three brick masons over there are plying their trade. Each is working along at a steady pace. Well, let's talk to them. Hi there.
Oh.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Oh, what does it look like I'm doing? I'm laying 50 bricks an hour to make my wage to feed my family. What am I doing?
How about you over there? I guess it's the same with you. Well, not exactly, friend. I'm putting together the best-looking brickwork of any bricklayer in this here city. And you up on the scaffold, how about you?
Oh, me? I'm building a cathedral, mister. I'm building a great cathedral.
Every man is like a locked door, and he may look pretty much like other men, but it takes a very special key to unlock him, to make him do his best. A leader is a man with a bunch of keys who likes to unlock doors. Unfortunately, many people in a position of leadership are not particularly good leaders. Some years ago, a pulp and paper mill manufacturing complex of a large company went through a gradual downhill slide in meeting manufacturing quotas. They had high absentee rates and, most especially, slipshod quality control. It was finally determined that these conditions were brought about by the inept leadership of the former manufacturing manager, who was a man of high technical qualifications but completely lacking in capability to motivate other people to get the job done. The new manager is also technically capable, but his greatest strength is in his penchant for effective leadership. His name is John Lender, and he had wasted no time in getting acquainted with everybody and making clear what he expected of people. In less than 2 weeks, Frank Foley, his technical director, the man in charge of product development and quality control for the 2 plants, was in his office.
Well, Frank, what's on your mind?
Mr. Lender, I'm turning in my resignation.
You can't be serious. Do you have another job?
No, but I can get one as a lab technician at least. My kids are grown and, well, what difference does it make?
Oh, it makes a lot of difference, Frank. You've been with this company for 22 years. In another 8 years, you'll retire in a healthy pension, be able to set up that lab, get some grants, do that independent research you've always wanted to do.
How did you know about that?
First, you tell me why you want to quit.
Well, it's not easy to explain, but I guess after all these years of working on projects and never finding out how much they helped and being picked at like some lab boy on his first job, it's been too much. Frankly, I'm pretty much convinced that you're going to fire me anyway, and so, well, I figured I'd quit first.
Whatever gave you the idea I'd fire you?
Why, there hasn't been a day go by that you haven't told me to change our procedures in some way. That place hasn't been so shaken up in years.
Don't you think you needed to know what the company expects and what I want you to do?
Yes, but whenever this happened to someone here before, they were getting ready to let him go, so I just thought I'd best move...
Frank, this isn't before. It's right now. If I didn't think you were important to this company, terribly important, I wouldn't bother to tell you what I wanted. I've been waiting for you to get that backlog cut down so we can spend a couple of days together going over long-range objectives for the company and how you think you and your lab can best contribute to them. But if you're going to quit, I'd better start revising things unless you'd like to give it a try.
Well, I'll be... Look, Mr. Lender,
Let's make it, John. Now, promise to answer a question. And since you're going to stick around a while, I guess that I'd better answer it. You see, I'm a technical man, too, although not as knowledgeable as you are. I've been reading your papers in pulp and paper technical journals with interest for years. A lot of those ideas ought to be tried right here in this plant. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to allot time to develop some of them towards specific goals.
Morale had reached a low ebb under the old leadership, or lack of it. John Lender's predecessor was an excellent chemist, but he'd tried to do everyone's job for him. He'd tinkered and interfered. He'd failed to set out objectives and guidelines, and when things didn't work, he'd pull some technicality out of his hat and fire someone.
We had gotten to the point where we were in a world of our own, and, well, not a very important world at that. We didn't know where we were going, and really got to believing that our boss didn't believe he could get us there anyway. We weren't even afraid of him, really, just wary. Kind of the way you'd be about a mad dog, We simply avoided him as much as possible. If things didn't go right, he'd try to do it himself anyway.
In just a few weeks, a big change took place in every activity of those pulp and paper mills. You could run into John Lender almost everywhere, and if there was a breakdown or other trouble, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty if necessary. But he had a way of making you believe in yourself. To make men want to do their jobs and do them well, Lender employs 6 rules. Make everyone feel he is part of the overall effort. Give qualified people freedom to do their jobs, but keep a light hand on the reins. Show that you care about the people under your supervision. Give credit for a good job well done personally. Assign blame for a job badly done specifically. Show confidence in your own leadership capability. Follow these rules, and your employees will assume greater responsibility, work with more enthusiasm, correct their shortcomings, and attain goals more effectively. This is the story of Philip Pride, a bright young man who worked and dedicated himself to his job and contributed to his company's goal until he was promoted to manager of his division. Every morning, he'd breeze through his division offices to his ivory tower with a cheerful good morning to everyone, assuming everything was humming along fine.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Pride.
Mr.
Happy to meet you, Mr. Pride.
Oh, Miss Frawley.
Yes, Mr. Pride.
Anything unusual going on this morning?
Oh, nothing much, really. Mr. Jenkins in sales called about processing those invoices to Webb and Ball, and I transferred him to Mr. Herman.
Fine.
And Mr. Torgeson in purchasing was very anxious about that warehouse space, so I transferred him to Mr. Johnson.
Fine, Miss Frawley. Couldn't have done better myself. That's real organization for you.
But all the while, there's a growing rumble of distant thunder, and Phil Pride's world comes crashing about his head.
Pride, you're costing this company a fortune. There's more recurrent overtime in your division than in all of the rest of the company put together. And the bottlenecks, Pride, you've got to get things moving. You're clogging up this whole corporation.
The awesome voice of J.B. Satterwhite, the president of the company, is enough to make any man's world come tumbling down.
Phil, it's not that you haven't planned things well, but you simply haven't followed through to spot the work habits of your people that spell trouble. Today, right now, I want you to go out through your office and just wander around casually and see if you can see the signs of what's slowing things down.
But, J.B., when they see me, they'll get busy.
My boy, you haven't been out of your ivory tower for so long, they'll probably never recognize you.
So, for several days, Phil came out of his ivory tower to stroll around his division offices, and he saw and heard some things that shocked him.
Yeah, I said, I've bet on the Colts over the Jets before, and I'd do it again.
The Water Fountain Caucus, about 3 deep any time of the day.
Now get this, Jack. I've taken this from you guys for the last time. What you need is a mouthful of knuckles, and I'm just the guy who can do it.
I don't feel like getting this out today anyway. Besides, who care? Yeah, I'll meet you in the canteen in 5 minutes.
Angry phone conversations, ho-hum work attitudes, recurrent patterns of overtime, backlogged paperwork, hectic operations in some areas, complete inertia in others, boredom, indifference, bitterness,
Irritations. They're all signs that your job isn't getting done. I've been watching it for some time, and I've stepped in before we have some real trouble.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, J.B. You can be sure that I'll go prospecting for clues to trouble every day from now on.
That's only the beginning, Phil. And it's going to be up to you to find your own ways of staying on top of things. Meantime, you can be sure I'll be asking you a lot of questions if I find your division dragging its feet again.
So Phil Pride called a meeting of his supervisory people. He had a little pocket notebook with him from which he read entries he had made during the week.
Harry, half your office force must be bivouacked around that water cooler at any given moment. Maud, at 2 p.m., I went past the stenographic pool yesterday, and there was only one girl in there, and she was talking on the phone. Mark, going by your office, I heard you on the phone threatening to knock someone's teeth in.
Phil, you be the same way. I'm sitting in the middle of everything. My people are all on overtime. Stuff is getting to me in the last minute. We've got this great, big, beautiful plan, and nothing works. Now, I've about had it. I'm ready for you to take this job.
Now, wait a minute, Mark. Let's try to solve the problem, not fight over it. Now, you all know your responsibilities, and I'll defend any one of you to JB if you're living up to them. But you've got to see that your people stay on the ball, too. From now on, I want every one of you to be an expert troubleshooter, because instead of being in my office all day, I'm going to be out among you, asking questions to make sure that everything's moving as it should. And I want you to do the same with your staffs. Remember, the two most dangerous words in business are, "I assumed." Don't take anything for granted. I'll be looking for a reason for everything your department does. And if you can't be an advocate for that action, I'll want to know the reason why.
That's great, Phil. Now we have to second-guess you, too. We still have our jobs to get done.
If your job is getting done, you won't have to second-guess me or any one of your associates in this division. As for my thinking, it will be toward getting the job done the best way possible, and that means putting myself in the position of our customers, of JB, and of every one of you.
You know, Phil, I like that. Now maybe I'll get a little help. Look, I know I shouldn't have flown off the handle. I'm kind of edgy. But could you come over to my shop for a few minutes? I want to show you something that's going
To spot work habits that spell trouble, you have to get out of the ivory tower and down where the problems are. Spotting trouble and solving it, after all, is the reason you have your job. Based on your experience, fire the right questions at the right people and find who is responsible. And put yourself in the place of everyone you deal with, customer, superior, subordinate, supplier. Trouble is your business. Come to grips with it before it happens by watching how your people do their jobs.
Hey, you see how he popped that Unpopular? Hey, wow, what a hitter, what a sticker. I bet you there ain't anybody can touch that guy for 100 years. What a grand slammer he came out
Happiness
there.
is when the home team can't seem to lose a game, and even the has-beens look like comers, and your club can do no wrong.
Run! Run, you bum, and get under it! And away! Oh, you lousy butterfingers! You dropped the ball! You dropped the ball, you bum! My little sister could have caught it.
Same ballpark, same player, same fan, but the team's in a slump, and even the stars seem like bush leaguers. And we begin to notice a great hitter's weak fielding. It's the same way in a business. When things are riding along well, we're inclined not to notice that some people are getting soft, sitting on their hands, indulging themselves in the luxuries of their positions. But let a slump come along, weakness becomes all too clear, and that's when problem people need to be helped.
How about that? I've almost made the same quota as last year, and it's early November. Let's see, where'd I put that crossword puzzle?
Harry Handsitter, once a great salesman, but now, since no one complains, he loafs along far below his capacity. What he needs is a shot in the arm. From you.
Now look, Harry, you can either sell our product or do puzzles, but you can't do both. As of now, I'm raising your annual quota by 20%.
20%? Look, it's November. I can't possibly...
Oh, yes, you can, Harry, if you want that bigger bonus. And right now, you have to if you want it.
Nothing like creating a climate of achievement to get things stirring again. And a little bonus to sweeten it wouldn't hurt.
Oh, no, Fred, I couldn't think of letting anyone else handle this one. I've been doing this for
Sam
years.
Self, the guy who can do anything in his department, and usually does. He's so bogged down with detail that his department is the company's main bottleneck.
Sam, you're very good at every job in your department.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. I just about have to, you know. There's no one I can really rely on. Staff keeps turning over so fast.
You hired them now, didn't you, Sam?
Yes.
Well, just what did you hire them to do?
To help get my job done, of course, but...
Is there any reason why you had to hire incompetent people?
Well, they're not really incompetent. It's just that there's so many important things that I need to do myself.
Nonsense, Sam. If that's the case, fire your staff and save the company some money.
Fire everyone?
Or delegate. Take time to teach people to do all the things you're doing and spend your time seeing that they get them done.
If you say so.
I say so.
Of course, not all problem people are really part of the problem, except as innocent bystanders, like Jerry Eager. Jerry has missed the boat on a number of opportunities and often fails in his assigned tasks. He's fast gaining the reputation of the company's misfit number one. It all began when Jerry first joined the company and made his first and only decision and acted on it. His supervisor called him in.
See here, Eager, I notice you took things into your own hands in the Bartlett matter.
Well, it seemed to be the only thing to do at the time, so
Why didn't you consult me on this?
It was such a small matter, I assumed that
Don't assume, and don't make decisions. That's what I'm here for. Anything that I want you to do or know, I will tell you about.
So Jerry stumbled along in the dark for a while until he couldn't stand the humiliation and lack of challenge any longer. He went to the general manager and asked for another job where he could be more in the mainstream and meet greater challenges. He got his wish and contributes much to the company effort. His former supervisor was transferred also to a less sensitive position. But the most noticeable person in time of business distress is the fellow personified by Knapp Alexander, whose empire building would have put the Caesars to shame. His department was big and busy, having been built stone by stone through the bullish years, and Knapp believed he needed every person.
Knapp, you know that things are pretty tight. Chunk out of the payroll of any in this company.
and every one of them working hard every day to get the job done.
But according to the records, not as fruitfully as they did 5 years ago when your department was half the size that it is now. Now we're back to that economy and productivity. And within 90 days, I want you to set that clock back 5 years.
Cut my staff in half? Oh, but you've got to be...
I've got to be in deadly earnest, Knapp. Cut it in half. What you've done before, you can do again.
And finally, there are the real eccentrics, like Webster, the legally trained executive who insisted that all sales contracts be so iron-bound that customers simply wouldn't sign them. But he said if he couldn't have his way about it, he couldn't be expected to be responsible.
No, I guess you can't, Webster. We have therefore arranged a generous severance in recognition of your past services and wish you the very best in future.
The long and short of it is that a great many problem people develop their problems because no one really asks enough from them. Most people welcome leadership and direction and are flattered by challenging demands. Don't hesitate to ask more from your people, no matter how well they're doing.
Oh, my, no. We never fire any of our executives. You see, we have these very refined selection techniques, so we never hire a man who can't do the job.
No, oh no, we don't fire people. That's the old way. Our company policy forbids.
Well, there's really no reason to dismiss anyone nowadays. Through training and counseling, we develop our people, and thus we don't permit them to become unsatisfactory performers.
Doggone it, it's just bad public relations to fire anyone.
Rationalizations. In a recent study, it was found that out of 80 firms, ranging from small businesses with 20 to 30 employees up to some of the biggest in the nation, only 13 companies had severed connections with any manager against his wishes within the previous 5 years. Even in those 13 companies, only 17 men had been fired, many of whom were given the opportunity of resigning. Can all of these rationalizations be true? Take the case of Jerry Kincaid, an executive in a company with a no-firing policy. After 3 years, he finds himself a little puzzled, and he carries his worry home with him. His wife, Laurie, notices something is wrong.
Jerry, is something worrying you?
No, not really, hon. I'm just thinking.
Look, is it your job? You haven't been... I mean, they haven't given you notice or anything, have they?
Oh, no. I almost wish they would. You know, they don't ever fire anyone. I sometimes think I've joined the biggest pool of zombies in the world.
Well, I think it's pretty nice about their not firing anyone. I can't see why you'd worry because you're not going to be fired.
I'm not worried. I didn't say I was. The company's supposed to have this perfect technique of selecting people so they don't have to fire anyone. Now, if that's true, how come other companies haven't figured it out, huh?
Well, maybe they're not as smart as our company.
Look, Laurie, I have 3 men working for me right now. One of them is 31 years old, and he's decided to retire on the job. You know? There's a guy in purchasing who screams at anyone who talks to him, and so they stick him in a corner where he doesn't have to do anything.
I know.
Now, we have another supervisor. Get this guy. He stops at the corner liquor store to pick up his pint of booze for the morning on his way to work. By noon, he's migrated to a downtown saloon where he has a standing order for a cab to pick him up and pour him back into his house at 4 o'clock.
It's that bad? Well, can't you...
I think the drunk will probably get fired for gross immoral misconduct sometime, maybe. That's the only ground the company policy will permit. But the neurotic in purchasing will probably stay around forever, being bypassed. Now, the one I'm really concerned about is my man, Harry. He's just quit working.
Well, have you talked to him?
Oh, yeah. He agrees that he's not carrying his load, but he keeps saying, I really work for this job. I've paid my dues.
Well, what are you going to do?
I didn't know when we started talking, but you know, I've just made up my mind. I'm going to fire him. It'll probably be the biggest favor anyone has done him for a year.
So Jerry fired his 31-year-old retiree and waited for the explosion. It wasn't long in coming. He was summoned to the office of Henley Richards, his division vice president.
Well, Jerry, I see you dismissed young Abernathy. No reason given on his separation notice. Now, we have to have a reason. Company policy, you know. What kind of misconduct
There was no misconduct, Henley. I fired him because he wasn't interested enough in his job to do it.
But that solution isn't acceptable in this company, Jerry. A transfer, retraining, anything like that would have been preferable.
Henley, you know me well enough to know that I tried all of that. This man had just found a way to retire and stay on the payroll. And if you look around, you'll find that there are others headed the same way.
You're just going to have to take him back, unless you can prove gross immoral conduct. Now, can you prove
No way. I'm not going to hire him back.
Then I'll have to transfer you to some less sensitive position.
Okay? Suit yourself. But before you do, just think of how you'll be running up your budget. You see, that was my objection to Abernathy. I was being charged for an unproductive man who didn't want to work for us. He just wanted to draw his pay.
But don't you understand, Jerry? It's bad public relations for us to fire anyone. It gives us a bad image in the employment market. And furthermore...
Have you thought about the image we have where it counts inside the company?
Well, yes. Yes, I have, Jerry, as a matter of fact. And you're right. Let's go over this in detail, and I'm going to talk to Abernathy. Then if there's no other solution, I'm going to back you all the way.
Well, I appreciate your confidence, Henley.
It isn't all confidence, Jerry. Not all confidence. You see, this company is being weakened by an unrealistic policy. And I guess I never thought about it before. And it's time it was stopped. Now, tell me the details.
With Jerry as an ally within his division, Henley Richards was determined to get the facts and, along with Jerry, present his case to the president of the company, Willard Almquist.
Jerry, do you mean to say there actually has been a study of reactions of people who've been fired?
That's right, Mr. Almquist, and every one of them was able to find employment elsewhere. Only a third of them reported any difficulty in getting a new job, and nearly three-fourths of them rated their relationship with their new supervisors as high.
And actually the clincher is that 95% of these discharged managers, all in their mid-30s, all with at least a bachelor's degree, felt that they were better off for having been fired.
Then you're saying that not only the company's better off for letting a man go when he just doesn't seem to fit in, but the man is better off as well.
Nobody gains by a relationship that doesn't work, Bill. And as long as we delude ourselves that our policy of never firing anyone is valid, we'll continue to weaken the effectiveness of our entire corporate effort.
Well, as you know, it's not my policy. I've simply accepted it as a tradition that I inherited, and some of the board will be aghast, but I'm going to support you in this policy change, at least as far as Abernathy's concerned. And by and large, we have a pretty good team here, and I'm going to do my best to keep it that way. But, well, tell me, what about Abernathy? Now, I hate to think that
he's just fine, Mr. Almquist. I have a letter right here from him thanking me for firing him and getting him back in the action again.
beautifully executed play, but I believe that the runner was out of bounds. Yes, I see that the runner, number 87, threw the handkerchief down at the boundary where he stepped out and is now penalizing himself 5 yards.
How about that, sports fans? The only game in the world where you can be both player and referee, the business game. And believe me, it's a mixed blessing when you have to referee a pair of your staff members who are at each other's throats, and at the same time, you're competing for the next big job up the ladder. But office clashes can be handled successfully if you know why people fight, how to be a good referee, and if you follow some of the sound rules for any business conflict that you might be engaged in yourself. Let's look in on the business life of Henry Sample, sales promotion manager of an office equipment manufacturing firm. Tim Reardon and Charlie Fagan, both ambitious, bright young men in his department, are constantly at sword points. Each is charged with developing promotion on a product line, and each must depend on department services to get the job done. Unfortunately, services can handle only one at a time.
Yes, Edna, what is it?
The Katzenjammer kids are here again.
Well, I suppose it's too much to expect that they come in peace.
It's too much to expect. I told them you're very busy this morning, that it's a bad time.
Well, you're right, it is a bad time.
But they have a new twist this time. They're both mad and flustered and red in the face and white-lipped as usual, but they say they've come to an agreement.
Well, that is news. Tell them to come in. Well, Edna tells me you've come to an agreement, which I must say is refreshing. Tim, suppose you tell me about it, will you?
Well, we've agreed that this company isn't big enough for both of us, and one of us will have to resign.
Oh? Which one, Charlie?
No, we haven't decided that. We couldn't very well. We're going to leave that up to you.
Right.
Up to me? I see. Well, I think that the way things have been going with you two, I'd better dismiss both of you immediately.
Oh, wait, we didn't mean that. It takes two to make a fight.
One of us going would solve the whole thing, don't you see?
Hold on. I take it that although one of you has to go, neither of you wants to leave. And so you're leaving the dirty work for me. Well, I won't buy it. Either you both go now or try something I'm going to recommend. Okay? How about it?
Well, I guess, it's okay with me if...
Same here, I guess.
Okay. Now, we're having clashes every week or so. Why? You don't know why. Because you haven't stopped to think. You know that you have a good job, but you're also having a problem because we just can't handle and process each man's project at the same time. Now, maybe I've been a little remiss, but here's what we're going to do.
Henry explained to the two men that he would assign a priority to each project in the department that had to use production or research services, and the services would handle them in that order. Then, if there were still problems, they were to bring them to him.
And one more word, gentlemen. If there's any more of this childish yelling in the halls, you'll both be looking for a new job. Understand?
Henry understands their problem pretty well, since he's under strain from a long-running competition for a vice presidency with the sales manager. Long ago, Henry decided that his best action was lots of hard work and dedication to what he felt was best for the company. And if that didn't work, he wasn't the right man for the job anyway. But Henry wanted it, really wanted it. And his rival, a brilliant but arrogant man named Tom Bristol, was giving him a hard run for it.
But Mr. Bristol, Mr. Sample's very busy right now, and he can't take the...
Never mind, Edna, never mind. He's already in, and it's okay. Hiya, Tom.
Hello, my friend. You don't really mind if I take a close look at Henry Sample's grindstone, do you?
Not really, Tom.
Come on, relax, Henry. I just dropped by to say I had a great chat with our esteemed president at the club last night. You know, you should join that club. One of the directors of our company belonged to.
Well, Tom, I'm working so many nights that it
and
just isn't
virtue
possible.
brings its own reward, right? Well, I wanted to talk to Mr. Akins about that, too. I said it was a pity that you had so much more than you could handle easily on your job. But I told him how much I admired your stamina. Well, Henry, your neck's getting red. Can't be that I've actually breached that famous sample even temper.
No, not a chance, Tom. I always blush under faint praise.
Yeah.
Look, was there something you wanted? You know, with my limited capabilities, every second counts.
Touche. Actually, I came by to find out who you bribe in purchasing to get your requisitions through so fast.
Bribe? I don't bribe anyone. I fill out the forms and tell Miss Tartan that the requisition's on its way.
Yeah, but there must be more to it than that. I do that too, but it never seems to work.
The reason it works for Henry is that he asks, never demands. And instead of spending time at a club he can't afford in order to rub shoulders with the top brass in the company, he hobnobs with the people who will help him get his job done. Result? He has strong allies who will help him at every level of the company. Naturally, he felt considerable vindication when the president advised him that the board had voted to make him a vice president. But he was not really prepared for Tom's visit to his office.
Well, Henry, I still can't understand it. But you won, hands down, and I came in to quit before you have a chance to fire me.
I had no plans to fire you. In fact, I'd hoped that you would stay. You're a darn good man and valuable to this company.
I believe you really mean that.
Look, Tom, I'll admit that you're not quite my style personally, but I believe in your capabilities.
But after all that sharpshooting I did, I'd think that you'd...
Perhaps if I'd lost out, I'd feel differently, Tom. I just don't know. But we both wanted that job pretty badly. Well, it's just that I was out to win, but I wasn't out to kill.
The biggest help to Henry was that he knew that even business conflicts have rules, and he knew every one of them. First thing in his favor was his reluctance to quarrel, to sulk, to lose his temper, no matter how much something nettled him. Second, he kept his values in line. Even in the heat of battle, he never slipped from a sound code of ethics. Third, he used dedication and hard work as his brightest weapon, and his coat of armor was his harmonious relationship with everyone in the company. Tom tried to take on this strong relationship, and it backfired, and he resigned, not because of Henry, but because almost everyone despised him. And finally, Henry, as he pointed out to Tom, fought hard to win, but never to kill. He wanted to preserve the team at any cost.
Can't bring up no water, Paul.
Here, son, let me get this cover off. Just what I was afeared of. Dry as a bone. Well, let's get some buckets. We're gone to the spring.
You never miss the water until the well runs dry. And by the same token, you never really notice morale until you're without it. Morale in a company has been described as the flame under the boiler, a kind of mysterious chemical that keeps the wheels turning. It's important that any manager understand what morale is, know how to tell when morale is high or low, and how to keep morale fired up at peak capacity. A book publishing company specializing in textbooks has grown over the years to be a huge operation. But as years went by, profits became slimmer and had reached the danger point. It was then that the board elected a working board member, a kind of ombudsman who could cross all lines of administration and authority at any level, as a listener, advisor, and evaluator. His name was Carlton Fitzhugh, and his courtly, charming manner, seasoned business acumen, and keen perceptiveness fitted him particularly for his job. He had a special interest in a new area of the company, the Audiovisual Teaching Aids Division, an interest which was shared by the company's president, Sterling Evans, who was deeply concerned by the lack of activity from audiovisual. Well, the two men talked it over.
So, as you can see, audiovisual was our great hope, Fitz. It meant the beginning of a shift from the old way of doing things to the new. It meant using copyrights that we already own to get into a market that's already rich, waiting, and unsupplied.
But it's never really gotten off the ground. Do you have any reason why?
Well, not really. They're set up modestly, but we hired the best man in that field to head it up. We've given them the full services of our sales and marketing divisions. The people are paid well by the standards of the company and the industry.
Yeah, but as yet only a half-dozen items on the market, and the last one was nearly a year ago.
Well, that's about the size of it.
Well, look, I'll mosey on down there and hang around a while in bland innocence and kind of see what's going on.
So Carlton Fitzhugh found his way to the division that was to be the company's hope. It took him quite a while because he had to go from the administrative wing through the printing plant and down a dim corridor past the boiler room. Fred Morton, the division manager, was in his office, a bare, makeshift place. At the moment of Fitzhugh's arrival, he was peeling an apple.
Hi there. I'm Carlton Fitzhugh. You must be Fred Moore.
Oh, yes. You're the new working board member. How did you ever find us?
Well, I'd admit it. It wasn't real easy. At one point, I thought I'd be cast away forever in the boiler room.
Better than being marooned forever in the AV division.
Well, I can't really follow you on that. The board thinks this is the most important activity of our company, where we can have more growth, find greater profits through a really lively center of income.
Well, Mr. Fitzhugh, the board may feel that way, but the word so far hasn't gotten past the boiler room.
Well, suppose you tell me about it, and the word will get back.
I don't know why not. Nothing else seems to work. Now, there's nothing personal in what I have to say, mind you. We're all treated with kindness and consideration like little children who are given their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and told to go out and play.
Fred went on to explain that he really has no authority to act. The vice president of the development division is a fine man who is semi-retired and in precarious health, and everything seems to stop there. If you were able, Fred is sure that he'd be able to shake something loose.
Right now, we have an even 24 instructional kits in secondary history, remedial reading, and new math, all set for manufacture. But they're stymied in about 12 jillion levels of review, legal, accounting, manufacturing.
But you know, Fred, all of those things have to be coordinated.
For nearly a year? For a company that wants to get moving, you certainly move in mysterious ways your wonders to perform.
You? Not we? I gather you don't consider yourself a part of all this.
Mr. Fitzhugh, being in back of the boiler room was, well, kind of a joke at first, and in a way a badge of pioneering pride. It's become a caste mark, a symbol of just how important this activity really is to the company.
Then why don't you quit?
Because I came here to do something very exciting and very challenging, and I guess there's a spark of hope left. Now look, my secretary and my operations manager are out sick today. Only I'm almost certain they're job hunting.
Well, that doesn't speak well for your ability to inspire.
No, it doesn't. And I'm ashamed of myself for that, too.
Fitzhugh asked Fred what he would do if he'd had his way, and for the first time he became animated and excited. That was the first of several meetings, casual at first and more purposeful as time went on. Finally, Fitzhugh made some recommendations to the president of the company.
Sterling, you have a very bad morale problem in AV, which probably hasn't come to your attention because of Hastings' bad health. And in fact, if you scratch the surface, I believe you'll find it pretty broad throughout the company.
I find that hard to believe. The people do their work and they seem happy.
They do what they're told and are complacent. There's a lot of difference. You see, job attitudes are bland and mechanistic, uninspired. People are frustrated and confused by overlapping authority, so they stay clear of the maze. They substitute paperwork and administrative procedures to keep them busy. And as a result, decisions are slow and poorly timed. In many cases, people don't know why they're doing a job, and often they're not sure what they're supposed to do.
Well, this is quite an indictment of my capability, Fitz.
Not yours, Sterling. It's all of us, the board and the leadership, who generally have allowed things to rock along, enlarging, engrossing, but not really growing.
Well, what do you suggest?
Well, I suggest that first you get Moore and AV out from behind the boiler room. Their location symbolizes everything that's bad about this situation. And then cut the red tape. Give them freedom beyond the usual chain of things. Use them as a pilot for streamlining the entire company.
Well, there's going to be a lot of jealous people.
Of course there are. But it's going to give them a shot in the arm, too, and they'll get a little fired up instead of accepting the cumbersome status quo. You know, when you get right down to it, good morale comes from giving everyone a chance to do an outstanding job and receive appropriate recognition for it. That's it. Good morale is really a climate of challenge, possibility, and recognition.